The next video we're going to be looking at is identifying triggers. That is, triggers that cause the borderline discomfort in some way. Triggers external stimuli in the form of perceived threats such as fear of rejection or abandonment for the borderline may lead to overwhelming anxiety or even explosive rage. The borderline is highly sensitive to others and his surroundings, causing him to feel uncomfortable or threatened and quite often socially awkward. Anticipating anxiety-provoking situations is often routine for most people. I avoid roller coasters because of few bad experiences. I may be missing out on a lot of fun on the roller coasters, but I've chosen to sacrifice the possibility of thrill rides for a feeling of safety, keeping my feet firmly planted on the ground and my food in my stomach. This means that the borderline must develop a good understanding of his likes and dislikes, fears and anxieties, and supports versus non-supports. You cannot identify triggers or change what you don't understand, though when you do understand something, you become empowered. Consider problems from every side, allowing for nuance, openness, and even vagueness. Always avoid assumptions. Consider how you associate one thing with another, while also considering the possibility that these associations are tangential and even unreasonable or illogical. Understanding valid and helpful associations and connectedness between ideas, including interpersonal contexts, can be extremely helpful, but it requires a huge amount of patience, emotional energy, and effort. Similarly, seemingly unimportant behaviors or benign compulsions exist for a specific reason, and trying to make connections to figure out why a particular behavior emerges can add invaluable insight, no less than understanding why a particular feeling is important. The law provides behavioral structure to almost everything in society, making lawyers who understand and apply the law powerful and needed. Similarly, understanding your own personal psychological rules will allow you to master yourself. For some borderlines, it can be helpful to self-impose rules of behavior, emotion, and thinking to assist with better functioning. We all do this in simple ways, such as forcing ourselves to go to sleep at an appropriate hour, but for borderlines, this requires rules that also take into consideration maladaptive and destructive behaviors. Identifying dangers, real or perceived, is important because it serves to proactively avoid situations that cause the borderline to spiral out of control. However, the downside to anticipatory proactive behaviors is that the borderline's list of perceived dangers may grow to such an extent that he becomes overly cautious, isolated, lonely, and even phobic. The borderline must learn to understand that he constructs reality in a very personal way, and only then can he understand the meaning that he attributes to behavior, emotion, and thinking, and only then can he attain stability and happiness. Avoiding and anticipating problems is a key area that helps minimize errors in hospitals, and doing so has clearly cut down on negative incidents that cause patient injury and even serious harm. A helpful idea lies in identifying the most important or relative seriousness of dangers. Quality assurance experts in hospitals made an amazing discovery when investigating the root cause of negative healthcare incidents. Although problems may be rooted in 20 issues, the 20 issues do not have equal or proportional harm. That is, the top few issues may account for the large majority of problems that cause negative incidents in the hospital. Even more amazing, if the top few problems are properly addressed and resolved, some of the lower ranking problems will partially or fully disappear as well. Similarly, the borderline may be able to identify 20 people or situations that cause him anxiety and he wishes to avoid. However, understood proportionally and by priority, there are probably only 2 or 3 people or situations that cause the large majority of serious anxiety to the borderline, and avoiding these will attend to the large majority of his anxiety. This is not to say that the borderline won't experience anxiety when encountering number 12 or 13, but 12 and 15 will produce far less anxiety when numbers 1, 2, and 3 are eliminated. This technique serves another purpose. The borderline may catastrophize, that is, feel that the world is always about to explode or implode when problems arise. Some problems are more serious than others, and this technique will help the borderline compare and contrast the seriousness or lack of seriousness of different issues. Over time, the borderline may even see number 18, 19, or 20 as so obtuse and non-threatening that some of the items on the list may simply fall out of the borderline's purview, and catastrophizing is then lessened. Finally, prioritizing the seriousness of problems in this way may also help the borderline better focus on his core values, as it helps him identify what is most important in his life. The list of issues can be reviewed and revised every few years. For example, the borderline may find that a new coworker really pushes his buttons to the extent that the borderline finds himself calling in sick or underperforming at the office. Contending with and identifying the new coworker as a problem may suddenly become a far greater priority than other seemingly important matters near the top of the list, because the borderline loves his job and wants to maintain his professional career track. When I started doing forensic evaluations, many clients would not show up for appointments. This caused me to feel angry and frustrated. And I was concerned that my negative feelings prohibited me from properly working with clients because I had wasted so much time and money, especially as I had rented space by the hour. I developed a list of problems associated with this, but the number one problem was quite simply that the client would not show up, and often without reason. I finally came up with a simple solution that took care of almost everything. I insisted on a non-refundable deposit with a signed agreement to assure that the client had incentive to show up for the appointment. Miraculously, the client's non-refundable deposits eliminated the problem virtually overnight and almost all of the other problems associated with this issue. It allowed me to be more in control, predict my schedule, minimize economic loss, and afforded me much greater certainty as to how much time I would need for a particular case. More importantly, when a client honored his agreement by showing up on time, I felt more relaxed and positively focused on understanding the case. Interestingly, it took me several years to institute this policy because I feared the clients would not give a non-refundable deposit and seek help with other experts. What I learned was that the clients were essentially in total control, and I had no control of my practice prior to instituting the non-refundable deposit. It was important to reestablish balance so that there was predictability for both the client and myself with regard to cost, scheduling, and expectations so that the client could be responsible for his role and I could be responsible in my professional capacity. It is also crucial to understand that problems cannot be solved unless they are first properly identified. We live in an era where it is not politically correct to speak openly about certain people, cultures, or behaviors that may be negative or destructive in various ways. Culture can be positive and beautiful, but culture can also be negative and even ugly. I have interviewed many people who've grown up in drug-filled cultures, both within their family and general community. It's a horrible culture to grow up in, although asserting so publicly could be considered ethnically or culturally insensitive. The problem is that failing to discuss these issues, it is impossible to identify where the real problem on the individual or community level exists. In fact, if the borderline cannot properly identify problems, then very often problems are misidentified and something else or someone else is blamed because that other target is less threatening or a politically correct object of scorn. For this reason, intuitive reasoning is insufficient, and that's what we're going to be looking at in the next video.